The kingdom of Alaris stood under a sky the color of soft smoke after rain. Its towers stretched high, white stone glowing in the evening light, and its people loved their queen, Marielle, who was known for both her kindness and her quiet wisdom. Her father had taught her to see the heart of every person before judging their worth, and she carried that lesson deep inside her. For many years, the queen ruled peacefully, yet one spring, signs of trouble began to stir. Strange tremors moved through the ground, and travelers from far villages spoke of lights dancing across the night sky that did not belong to stars. The royal advisors argued that these were omens, and that the queen must choose a protector for the kingdom. Someone who could stand beside her should chaos strike. So, messengers were sent across the realm, calling for brave men to come forward. Lords and knights from distant lands arrived at the castle gates, their armor polished, their swords bright, each man eager to prove his strength. The selection took place in the grand courtyard, where the queen watched from her tall balcony. There was a parade of soldiers, loud, confident, and proud. Some carried banners showing their family crests, while others told tales of battles they had won. The queen listened politely, but felt no spark within her heart. Power, she thought, was more than loud words or shiny armor. Then one man walked forward quietly, without the sound of trumpets or cheers. He wore no armor, only a plain tunic of deep gray. His name was Ethan Ward, a craftsman's son from the small town of Brendale. He had worked as a carpenter and a builder, known for fixing what others thought was beyond repair. When the guards asked him what skill he would offer the queen, he simply said, "I can make broken things whole again." The court laughed at first. A builder among warriors seemed out of place. But when Ethan lifted his head and met the queen's gaze, she saw something unusual in his eyes. They were calm, yet full of deep light, as though he carried a secret strength that had no need to shout. After the trials, the advisors gathered around Queen Marielle to give their opinions. They pushed for one of the knightsmen of noble birth, who could display their power in clear, visible ways. But the queen tapped her fingers on the arm of her chair and looked down at the quiet builder, still standing in the courtyard. "He does not look like the rest," said one advisor. "No," said Marielle softly. "That is why he caught my attention." The next morning, the queen made her choice. To the shock of the entire court, she named Ethan Ward as her personal guard and companion. Some whispered that she had lost her mind, that a simple craftsman could not protect a ruler. Others said she was testing the courage of her people. When told of her decision, Ethan bowed his head and said, "Your Majesty, if I am to serve, I will do so with all that I have." And so, his life in the royal castle began. At first, life moved quietly. Ethan followed the queen through her daily meetings and helped with small repairs in the palace halls. He never sought attention, yet wherever he went, problems seemed to solve themselves. Walls that had cracked for years suddenly held firm after his touch. The queen's heavy garden doors, once stuck through seasons of rain, opened smoothly after he adjusted their hinges. One afternoon, as they walked through the courtyard, the queen watched him work. His hands moved with ease, strong but gentle, and his face carried that same calm look she had noticed on the first day. "You work as though you've done this for 100 years, she said. Ethan smiled slightly. When the heart is steady, hands remember what to do. Marielle found herself watching him more than she intended to. There was no pride in him, no hunger for power, yet he had presence, a quiet certainty that seemed older than time. She could not explain it, but in his company, the air felt clearer. At night, she sometimes stood by her window, looking at the city below. The tremors had begun again soft at first, then growing stronger week by week. The people grew afraid. The stars themselves seemed restless, flickering oddly as if the sky were breathing. And still, Ethan remained calm. The queen began to trust his quiet words over the loud advice of her council. When others panicked, Ethan spoke simply, and his words carried peace. Once, when the night wind howled through the palace and thunder rolled over the mountains, Marielle looked out and saw Ethan standing on the balcony, watching the storm without fear. She joined him there. "You are not afraid," she said. He looked at her with the same calm eyes. "Fear comes and goes," he said, "but truth stays." In that small moment, the queen felt something stirred deep within her. Her sense that she had chosen not by accident, but by fate. She did not yet know the extent of the power that lay waiting inside the man before her. But part of her already knew that when the time came, Ethan Ward would change everything. The night grew quiet once more, and for the first time in weeks, the queen slept peacefully, unaware that her choice had already set the course of destiny in motion. The days in Alaris passed quietly for a short time after Ethan Ward became part of the queen's court. He spoke little and listened much. The people began to grow curious. Whispers moved through the castle halls that the queen trusted this calm man more than her oldest advisors. Some thought her choice was foolish. Others thought it was brave. Queen Marielle did not speak of it often, but she knew deep inside that something unusual surrounded Ethan. It was not only his calm nature, or the way his eyes seemed to read every person he met. It was the strange sense of stillness that came with him, as if storms might pause when he walked by. That year, the land began to behave in strange ways. At first, the river that ran through the capital turned bright silver for an entire night, shining even without the light of the moon. The next day, fishermen came running to the castle, saying they had seen flashes of light beneath the water that were not fireflies or reflections. Farmers spoke of crops growing twice as fast during storms, and shepherds saw strange clouds move against the wind. The queen gathered her council to speak about it. "We have seen nothing like this in any memory," said her chief advisor, his hands shaking. "The signs grow darker every day." Marielle nodded slowly. "The land is changing. We must learn why." When Ethan was asked to speak, he stood at the edge of the room and said quietly, "It is not darkness. The world is speaking. But we have forgotten how to listen." The room went silent. Some men frowned. Others whispered that the craftsman spoke nonsense. But the queen studied him carefully. He did not speak with pride. He spoke as though he had already seen what others feared to imagine. That evening, Marielle called him to her private chamber. He came quietly, bowing before her without hesitation. The queen walked to the tall window and looked out over the city lights. "Ethan," she said softly, "you speak of things as if you can see what lies beyond sight. Tell me, who taught you these words?" "I was not taught, Your Majesty," he replied. "Sometimes the earth hums, and the heart understands." Marielle turned to him, puzzled but not afraid. "Do you feel that hum now?" He nodded. "Everywhere. It grows stronger each day. The world is shifting toward something new. But change is not always harm." The queen stood in silence. She did not know why, but his words brought her calm, even as strange winds began to blow across the land. In the weeks that followed, the danger became real. One afternoon, the great palace trembled under their feet. Dishes fell, walls groaned, and people screamed as the ground cracked open near the city gate. Guards rushed through the castle, shouting for the queen to take shelter. "Bring her to the mountain safehold," cried one of the captains. But Marielle did not move. She looked instead for Ethan, who stood calmly in the hall near the great columns, watching the floor with narrowed eyes. "Ethan," she called. "What is happening?" "Is what I told you," he said. "The world is speaking." "Then speak back to it," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan closed his eyes and placed his palm on the nearest wall. Everyone watched. The stones beneath his hand glowed faintly, as if the sun had touched them. The shaking slowed. Dust fell softly from the ceiling, but the walls stood firm. When the tremor passed, the people were silent. No one could explain what had happened. Ethan stepped away as if nothing unusual had taken place, and simply said, "It will return again." "The earth has not finished its story." Marielle looked at him with wide eyes. "How did you do that?" He only smiled a small, quiet smile and bowed his head. "Sometimes mending requires more than tools. Sometimes the hands remember what they were meant to do." When the others had gone, the queen remained alone in the hall, her heart beating fast. She could not forget the sight of his hand glowing against the stone. It was as if he held the breath of the world itself. In the days that followed, Ethan was never far from her side. He still worked as a simple man, fixing what was broken, speaking gently, helping the frightened people of the city. Yet everywhere he went, small miracles followed. Flowers bloomed early in dry soil. Cracked bridges held strong under heavy carts. Children spoke his name in the streets as if it brought safety. The queen often watched him quietly from the upper balcony. She began to see that the light around him was not only from his hands, but from his heart. He did not seek glory or reward, simply cared for the world, piece by piece, as though it belonged to him and to everyone at once. One night, as the city slept under strange silvery clouds, Marielle found herself standing at the palace gate. Ethan was there, looking up at the sky. "The storm will return soon," he said softly. "And when it does, everything will be tested." "Can we survive it?" the queen asked. "That depends," he said, "on whether we remember who we are." She did not understand what he meant, but something deep inside her whispered that his words were true. And though fear moved through her for the first time as queen, she also felt hope, because she knew that Ethan would be there when the storm finally came. The night wind passed gently through the city, carrying with it the faint hum of a world waiting to reveal its secrets. And somewhere beyond the hills, thunder began to roll. The strange storms grew stronger with each passing day. At first it had been trembling ground and glowing clouds, but soon the world itself began to bend in ways no one could explain. In the mornings, the river would shine like glass, and by night, all parts of the city flickered as if they were made of light instead of stone. People said the sky had turned into a mirror of the earth. Some feared it meant the end of all things. Queen Marielle stood on the highest balcony of the castle, watching the horizon twist and ripple. Her guards begged her to stay indoors, but she refused. "If the world is breaking," she said, "then I must see it with my own eyes." Ethan Ward stood beside her, quiet as always. The faint silver in his eyes shimmered as he looked out across the kingdom. "It is beginning," he said softly. "What is beginning?" the queen asked, though she already knew this could not be something small. "The world is remembering," he said. "It forgot itself for too long. Oh, it must decide what it wants to become." Before she could answer, a flash of light swept through the sky. The towers trembled, the air filled with a low humming sound that seemed to come from the bones of the earth. Then came the real shock. The walls of the palace faded before her eyes. One heartbeat, they were solid stone. The next, they looked like glass, showing the trembling city beyond. People screamed and ran through the halls. The guards tried to pull the queen away, but Ethan held up his hand. "No one move," he said calmly. "The world is listening." Marielle stared at him. "Ethan, what are you saying? Do something." He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. At first nothing happened, but then a wind seemed to rise without sound. His hair moved gently, though the air around him was still. Faint light spread through his skin, a soft glow that grew brighter with each breath. The queen stepped backward, her eyes wide. The courtiers who remained stood frozen in silence. Ethan lifted his hands slowly, palms open to the sky. It was as if the storm itself answered him. Long threads of light reached down from the clouds, wrapping around his arms like ribbons. The ground shook once, then again, and then silence. The golden light spread outward through the palace, covering walls, columns, and floors. Everything it touched became clear and solid again. The distortions melted away like mist under the sun. When the glow faded, the city below was still. The wind stopped. The world was whole again. The people began to whisper. No one spoke loudly, as if afraid to disturb the air. Marielle could only stare at the man before her. His hands still glowed faintly, though the storm had ended. His eyes were bright, calm, and filled with something she could barely name. She took a step forward. "Ethan," she whispered. "What are you?" He looked down at his hands as if surprised by what he saw. After a long moment, he said, "I am only human, Your Majesty. But that is more than anyone remembers." His voice was gentle, without pride or fear, yet his words carried the weight of stars. The queen stood silent for a long time. Then she said, "You saved the kingdom." "No," Ethan said. "The kingdom saved itself, only reminded it how." By the next sunrise, every soul in Alaris knew what had happened. People called him the light bearer, the one who had quieted the storm, but Ethan refused all praise. He worked as he always had, fixing broken doors and repairing stone roads, smiling only when children waved to him in the streets. Still, none could forget the moment his hands had glowed brighter than fire and steadier than the sun. Some said he commanded the world itself. Others said he was a chosen spirit sent by destiny. But Queen Marielle saw something deeper. She saw a man who carried power as if it were a duty, not a crown. At night, she often thought of his words that he was human and nothing more. If that was true, she wondered what it meant for all of humanity. Had her people always carried such strength within them and simply forgotten? If so, what else could they awaken to? He avoided talk of miracles, saying only that true power was the same as true kindness. It worked quietly. One evening, when the courtyards were peaceful again, the queen found him repairing a broken lantern near the gates. The storm had taken its light days before, and now he was gently fitting new glass into the frame. "You can shape the sky," she said softly, "yet you still take time to fix a lantern." He smiled. "Every light matters, Your Majesty. The sky only shines because small lights hold it up." His answer lingered in her heart long after she had left him there under the quiet sky. The city slept, safe and whole again, its streets lit by soft golden lanterns. And for the first time, Marielle understood that the power he carried was not only in his hands, but in his way of being a reminder of the quiet greatness that lives in every human heart. The kingdom rested in peace that night, but far in the distance, the silver sky flickered again, as if waiting for what would come next. After the great storm, the kingdom of Alaris entered a strange time of calm. The people called it the quiet season. There were no tremors, no storms, and the rivers ran smooth and clear again. Yet even in peace, the world felt different. The sky seemed brighter, as if it held a secret glow. The air hummed very softly, like a low song that only the heart could hear. Queen Marielle spent her mornings walking through the palace gardens. Flowers had begun to bloom out of season, and the fountain's water danced higher than before. Wherever she went, the world seemed a little more alive. But every time she looked at the palace walls, she remembered how they had glowed on that night, saved by the power of one quiet man. Ethan Ward still lived and worked as modestly as before. He never spoke of what he had done. When people tried to thank him, he smiled kindly and told them to thank the world instead. And Marielle could see that something had changed within him. His eyes now carried a faint light, almost hidden, like a candle behind frosted glass. One morning, she found him sitting by the fountain, watching the water move. He did not hear her approach until she said his name softly. "Ethan." He turned and stood at once. "Your Majesty," she smiled. "How many times must I tell you not to bow to me every hour of the day?" He gave her a small, shy smile. "Old habits, Your Majesty." She sat beside him on the stone bench. The water shimmered in front of them. The sound was peaceful. But when she looked at him, she saw that his expression was distant. "You seem troubled," she said. "Does the storm still weigh on you?" He shook his head. "No, but peace can be heavy too." She looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "This calm will not last forever," he said. "The world breathes, Your Majesty. Every breath means movement change. What comes next will test the hearts of men more than the storm tested their walls." The queen fell silent. Deep down she felt he might be right. Still, she did not want fear to rule her once more. "Whatever comes," she said, "Alaris will stand. The people believe in you now. You have given them hope." Ethan looked at her with gentle eyes. "I did not give them hope," he said. "You did. They looked to you because you chose to believe when others doubted." Her face warmed as she looked away. "Perhaps," she said softly, "but I could not have believed without you." For a moment, neither spoke. A bird landed near the fountain and drank from the water. The air smelled of jasmine and rain. Days passed, and the queen noticed that the people had begun building again. New towers rose and old streets were cleaned. The markets were full, laughter filled the air, and music returned to the squares. But among the joy, Marielle noticed that some people had begun to think of Ethan as more than a man. They spoke of him as a symbol, maybe even something higher. One afternoon, she saw a group of villagers bowing to him as he passed through the courtyard. Ethan looked uncomfortable, asking them gently to stand. When she asked him about it later, he sighed. "They think light only lives in certain people," he said. That is not true. The same power that lives in me lives in all of them. It only waits to be remembered." "Then why cannot everyone call it forth as you do?" she asked. He looked out toward the horizon, because most hearts doubt themselves. Doubt is what keeps light asleep. His words made her think deeply. That night, she could not sleep. She sat by her window, looking out over her glowing city. The moon hung low, bright and pale. She realized then that she did not just admire Ethan for his power, but for his peace. He carried it like a torch inside him, and wherever he went, he lit others without burning himself. Later that week, a messenger arrived from the borderlands. A strange mist had begun to cover the forests in the east, and travelers who entered sometimes never came back. Fear began to spread again. The council gathered quickly to speak of war or flight, and once again, all eyes turned to Ethan Ward. When asked what they should do, he said only, "You cannot fight fog with swords." The Queen leaned forward. "Then what can we do?" "Listen," he said. "The world speaks again. We must hear what it is saying before we act." It was not the answer the council wanted, but the Queen trusted his calm. That night, she stood with him at the edge of the gardens, watching the first wisps of mist drifting in under the moonlight. "Are you afraid?" Ethan asked her. She shook her head. "I was once, but not anymore." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Then you understand." There was silence, broken only by the sound of the fountain in the distance. In that still moment, Marielle realized something new. The awe she felt for him was not born from power or miracles. It came from the quiet truth he carried, that every person, even a queen, could be more than what they believed themselves to be. As dawn came, the mist thickened in the east, yet so did the light over the city. Queen turned to Ethan and said, "Whatever happens, we will face it together." Ethan nodded. It was meant to be. The sun rose slow and golden, spilling light over the towers of Alaris. The world waited once more, holding its breath before the next change. On the morning after the mist first touched the borders of Alaris, the sunlight rose weak and pale. The usual golden color had turned to silver, and the city's streets were strangely quiet. People shut their windows, animals hid, and even the sound of bells faded in the distance. The fog had grown thick across the eastern hills, and every hour it moved closer to the capital. Queen Marielle stood on the balcony wrapped in her cloak. The cold air brushed her face, but what unsettled her more was the way the fog moved. It did not float like ordinary mist. It rolled like living breath, shifting in slow circles, whispering faint sounds that were not quite words. Behind her, Ethan Ward approached silently. Steps were soft, but she always knew when he was near. She turned toward him, her face pale but calm. "It has reached the outer valley," she said quietly. "2 villages are lost inside it already." He nodded once. His eyes reflected the strange silver sky. "The world is being tested again," he said. "But this time, the test is not of power. It is of the heart." "What must we do, Ethan?" she asked. "Tell me what you see." He looked past her, watching the fog creep between the trees like a living wall. "It will keep coming," he said. "It grows from fear itself. Every frightened heart feeds it." The Queen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then I will not fear." He smiled faintly, but did not look at her. "One heart at peace is a start," he said softly. That evening, the fog reached the edge of the city. Guards lit torches, but the flames flickered weakly, dimmed by the silver air. No birds sang, and no wind moved through the trees. The world had gone still, as if waiting. Marielle gathered her council, but the men were nervous and argued among themselves. Some wanted to flee to the mountains. Others wanted to burn the fields to slow the mist. No one could agree. Finally, Ethan spoke. "Fire will not stop it," he said. "Running will not hide you. The fog is made of what you carry inside. Only truth and courage can move it back." The men stared at him, confused. One shouted, "Do you mean to fight fear with words?" Ethan answered, "With hope." The council fell silent. The Queen rose from her seat and looked at him with steady eyes. "If hope is our weapon," she said, "then we will give it to the people." That night, the great bells of Alaris rang across the city. The Queen herself walked through the streets, her cloak trailing in the dust, calling for her people to gather. Ethan walked beside her, his calm presence giving strength to those around him. Children peered from windows, and one by one the doors opened. Soon, thousands filled the city square, faces wary but watching their queen. She climbed the stone steps and turned to them. The fog pressed at the edges of the city walls, glowing faintly in the torchlight. Yet she stood tall. My people, she said, her voice carrying through the night. The world is afraid, and we are part of it. But remember, this Alaris was built by hands that never gave up. We have light within us no fog can swallow, her words echoed. People wept quietly. Some reached for each other's hands. Ethan raised his palms toward the sky, and a faint silver light began to glow around him again. The fog shuddered. It moved forward, then stopped. The light from his hands spread slowly like dawn over the city. He turned, looking toward the crowd. "Do not hide your hearts," he said. "Let them shine."
Ow.
Every light matters. And then the miracle happened. The people lifted lanterns, torches, even small candles. One by one, lights blinked open all across Alaris. The glow of thousands of flames rose like stars on Earth. The fog hissed as it touched the light, rolling backward, thinner and thinner, until it broke apart completely. The sky cleared. The stars returned overhead, bright and still. When the silence settled, the city roared with joy. The people fell to their knees, cheering the queen and the man beside her. Marielle turned to Ethan, her heart full. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us again." He shook his head, looking out toward the horizon where the fog had vanished. "No, Your Majesty, you all did. The power was never mine alone." The queen paused, her eyes shining. "And yet," she said, "it was you who reminded us who we are." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "That is all I ever wanted." Years passed after that night. Peace came to Alaris, not because the storms never returned, but because its people no longer feared the darkness. They had learned what power truly was: kindness, courage, and unity. Queen Marielle and Ethan walked together through many seasons. The city grew bright and strong, guided by wisdom and compassion. Songs were written about them, not as ruler and servant, but as two hearts that showed the world what it meant to be human. And so, the legend of Alaris lived on. People would tell their children stories of the quiet one who held back the storms, and the queen who believed in him. Every time the wind carried a silver glow across the night sky, they remembered the moment when one man's light had awakened the light in all. It was said that on the final night of his life, Ethan stood again by the fountain, watching the stars reflect in the water. The queen found him there, smiling peacefully. "Is it time?" she asked. He nodded gently. "But do not be sad. The light never leaves. It only changes form." The next morning, the fountain water shimmered brighter than ever before. The people said it was his gift to them. "I promise that even when hands grow still, the light they spark in others shines forever." And under that same glow, Queen Marielle ruled her realm with grace, her heart forever full of awe for the man she had chosen, the man who had reminded her what true power really was.